This is also the song that made me think most of the Loki TV show, actually, particularly the lyric, "There are some things you just can't pretend don't matter." Because the trickster, to some extent, wants to just have fun and play and do his trickster stuff.
Yeah.
But the Loki TV show does a good job of forcing the trickster to recognize that he has a function.
Yeah.
And that if he doesn't perform his function, everything will end, including fun.
Yeah.
So he's in a bind.
Yes.
And I feel like Into the Darkness has that same recognition. Like, the playful part of you is on board with recognizing some things you just can't pretend don't matter. So what are you going to do? What are you going to do?
Yeah.
It's the most meta one too, where it's kind of reflecting on storytelling and television. Like, right at the end, I'm so sorry, my friend. Your television is pretend, and all your books and friends have turned to ash in your hands.
Yeah.
Do you have any reflections on how that song ends, given that the book references, the television show references, they're not really falling to ash in your hands in the record, because they're all being animated and put to life to be in the spirit of Sisu and the trickster.
Yeah.
So what is this song saying about storytelling, narratives, about certain books and things that might be on the television that do turn to ash?
Yeah.
And that are pretend.
Yeah. I think the whole song, each section kind of serves a different function. So the verses are definitely, like I was saying before, the kind of fantasy world pulling you in, and they're all, telling you you'll be better here with us. And I think as someone who kind of seek refuge away from people and more in kind of in stories and in books and movies, is kind of very appealing to become solely obsessed with that.
In some ways, the stories, especially if we're reading powerful myths that have existed in different forms through time, then the stories might make a lot more sense than the actual behavior of the random human that's bothering you.
Exactly. Yeah. And then, the choruses are kind of that real world impeding, telling you not good, it's not going to be okay, and things like that. The kind of things that push you to want to kind of enter a different place and go away from the real world. And then with the verses, or the bridge, with that, some things you can't pretend doesn't matter, doesn't matter in the end. It's kind of the reconciliation of having to come back to the real world, and whether or not you can, and what are you going to do if all you end up with is just being completely disconnected. So then, for the purposes of the song, in the end, our singer, main character in the song, doesn't pull out of that world and gets completely engrossed in it. So that would be the ending of, it's all turning to ash and there's nothing real anymore.
So there's a serious risk to losing one's groundedness in consensus reality, being able to function well, if one focuses on the fantasy and the story, which is comforting and might make more sense. And at the same time, beyond that particular song and the fate of the character in that song, there is something paradoxically enlivening and essentially true about many of these stories that you find yourself gravitating
towards. Definitely. I think it was maybe addressing a sort of fear in myself that I'll become too involved in everything and lose my grip on reality.
Are you familiar with Joseph Campbell and the idea of the hero's journey?
No.
So according to Joseph Campbell, they're stories across all cultures have certain universal characteristics.
Oh, that's with the... there's the coming of age.
Exactly.
Okay, yes, I do. Yeah. I read a bit about that in one of my classes once.
Yeah. So, and that's why Joseph Campbell stories have this attraction to us.
Yeah.
Because there's universal themes and the idea of growth and demonstrations of Sisu.
Yes.
I would say, as a character undergoes an ordeal and through being challenged, that they need to grow.
Yeah.
If the ordinary world shifts in a certain way. And then the trickster would be one of the archetypes. So in this book, which is referencing the hero's journey called the writer's journey, it's meant to be for it's mythic structure for writers is the subtitle, and it's mostly for screenwriters, saying these are the elements of all stories, the rite of passage and the what you were just referencing.
Yeah.
But then also the archetypes, and one of the archetypes is the trickster.
Yeah.
Which is why I have this book too. So according to Christopher Vogler, the author of this book, in the chapter called Trickster, tricksters serve several important psychological functions in stories. They cut big egos down to size and bring heroes and audiences down to earth. By provoking healthy laughter, they help us realize our common bonds, and they point out folly and hypocrisy. Above all, they bring about healthy change and transformation, often by drawing attention to the imbalance or absurdity of a stagnant psychological situation. And it's, I think, again, right from the beginning of the record, there is this absurdly stagnant situation where the character, whether it's the TVA authority figure or a guy that doesn't understand boundaries.
Yes.
There's something absurd about how stagnant that is.
Yeah.
And the function of the trickster is to poke fun at it, to be free, be a kind of radical contrast to how stagnant that is. And there's references to Loki immediately here. One of the most colourful tricksters in mythology is Loki, the Norse god of trickery and deceit. And in the Loki myths, he is fiery in nature, and his darting, elusive energy helps heat up the petrified, frozen energy of the gods, moving them to action and to change.
Yes.
The trickster being a catalyst character. Do you think that does that resonate, this account of what the function of all tricksters is?
Yeah.
And do you feel that are you functioning like a trickster in this way?
I think, based on that description, yes. I think so, especially with that concept of, whatever the person being addressed is, especially if it's like, an uncomfortable man or, any sort of person that's enacting sort of their societal strength against you. And I think that concept too of like the need to disrupt that is very strong. And I think also personally, I feel like as much of a bummer and like unenjoyable it is to go through being treated like that by someone, I think it would be much worse to be that someone. I mean,
it's so boring.
Yeah, it's so boring.
It's not just boring, it's a big problem.
Yes.
But it's stifling.
Yeah.
And once the playful trickster is there, singing about beaches and peaches, then just how stifling and stuck these characters that show up at various, and how boring that is.
Yeah, definitely, and kind of sad to a degree.
Yeah.
I mean, I think pulling back to like the Little Mermaid myth, you definitely, by the end, feel a little sad for the prince to not be able to make his connection and break through and connect with her and, actually make that step forward.
Yeah, poor prince.
Yeah.
And even after he wasn't killed.
Yeah.
That was his opening of a door. That was his opportunity.
Yeah. He didn't.
Transformation.
Didn't go for it.
Yeah. As I was rewatching the trailer for the Loki TV show, a couple of the statements made in it were, no one bad is ever truly bad, and no one good is ever truly good. That's what Loki says.
Yeah.
And then Mobius, is that what the other character's called?
Yes.
Is saying he believes stupidly that Loki could be anyone he wants to be, which fits with the opportunity, seizing the opportunity, radical transformation theme.
Yeah.
Even someone good.
Yeah, definitely.
And so it's interesting how the trickster character plays, to some extent, outside the good and bad dichotomy.
Definitely. But
then there's something good and culture-serving about that, paradoxically.
Definitely. I think also, seeing him go through his character transformation in that show kind of makes you look back at the older movies and stuff and kind of really see his function in those, and kind of, Thor wouldn't be Thor without Loki and all of those kinds of things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, to be so paradoxical and to be outside of those categories, back to the original thesis in the Trickster Makes the World book, enables the culture to exist with its scaffolding.
Definitely.
So the idea of paradox is very important in this final book, in our very scholarly conversation, but appropriately scholarly. I think the band is called Loki's Folly, and the music really is delving into each of these areas that are highlighted in these books.
Yeah.
So, Big Magic, Creative Living Beyond Fear by Elizabeth Gilbert is the first book that I thought of earlier when you were saying about there being the two needing to be in touch with both sides of one's energy.
Yeah.
The seriousness and the playfulness.
Yeah.
Because there's a contrast that she makes in my favorite section of this book, which is all about harnessing creativity. It's kind of like the artist's way.
Yeah.
And it's a big influence on the book about creativity that I've been working on, called The Hummingbird Hand. And there's a section in one of the 5 parts of it is called Trust, and there's a subsection called The Martyr versus the Trickster. And Elizabeth Gilbert thinks that many creative people, many of us have this addiction to creative suffering, and that's related to the martyr energy and the idea that I have to suffer for my art. And if I'm not suffering, then I don't have authenticity. So if we see just the moments where the person is screaming and they're clearly voicing their pain, like if we get too caught up in the martyr energy, then we just have that and we have no beaches and peaches.
Yeah.
And Elizabeth Gilbert is advising us that if we do intentionally choose between these two energies, it's a better idea to choose the trickster.
Yeah.
We all have a bit of trickster in us, and we all have a bit of martyr in us. Okay, some of us have a lot of martyr in us, she says. But at some point in your creative journey, you will have to make a decision about which camp you wish to belong to, and therefore which parts of yourself to nourish, cultivate, and bring into being. And she warns people to choose carefully, and there's a little primer on the difference. So martyr energy is dark, solemn, macho. Makes me think of the guy who's stuck and stifled.
Yes.
Hierarchical, fundamentalist, austere, unforgiving, and profoundly rigid. Trickster energy is light, sly, transgender, transgressive, animist, seditious, primal, and endlessly shapeshifting. So I thought of this contrast that she has when you said about the need to have both energies. But what you were saying is that we need to have both energies.
Yes.
Rather than that we need to choose between them.
Yeah.
Could you return to this idea of harnessing or being in touch with both energies? Yes, the trickster, as we've been talking about through the interview.
Yeah.
But also something else.
Yeah.
That isn't as boring and stifling as the martyr energy as described here.
Yeah.
But is in touch with the seriousness and the suffering.
Yeah. I think if, the entirety of human history has any, weight on things, I think suffering is something that, is very, very much going to be present for most of, probably my whole life. I don't think I'll go through a time where there's no suffering and no sadness in the world. And I think to ignore that would be dishonest.
Yeah.
And I think being honest about emotions is very good. And I think when you have those intense and dark emotions, the best thing you can do is to kind of voice them and give them out to the world and not hold them in and let them simmer and stifle you from within, but to share it with everybody, because I think that's really the only way to heal from having any sort of painful experience or emotions.
Whatever archetypes are at play in the Little Mermaid seem to be relevant there.
Yeah.
And the idea of harnessing the voice. There are moments of pure anger, I think, and for me, anger is an emotion that has to do with an awareness of boundary violations. Something isn't right.
Yeah.
And there's a knowing in the anger.
Yeah.
And so to be able to channel that, and so that's one thing that's happening related, because you talked about honesty about emotions.
Yeah.
Something else that's happening with emotions in the record. There's a few references to fear. So in Into the Darkness, there's the question, we like here, no need to fear, don't ever need to go, no need to fear in Into the Darkness.
Yeah.
And then the other song that references fear is
Poison
Hearts, which we haven't talked about. So let's make sure that each of the songs that we haven't at least visited and allowed a cameo. Get to say before the end. And Poison Heart is a really important one because there's this idea of fear and love being connected in some way.
Yeah.
And so if we find ourselves in the situation, if the character that has the poison heart, she got no more love, means no more fear, no more fear. No more fear seems
nice. Yeah.
But it goes with there being no more love.
Yeah.
And it seems like back to choices, we can choose the intense emotions and the awareness of pain and the suffering.
Yeah.
And that enables joy.
Yeah.
As well. But it's a package deal.
Yeah.
And we could, maybe it's just fiction that we could not choose that.
Yeah.
And the person, like the prince, or the stifled person, chooses to invest in the fiction that we could not choose.
Yeah.
Being as we are.
Yeah.
To have the emotions that we have. Could you reflect a little bit more on this, the idea of the package deal of love and fear?
Yeah.
And the honesty about emotions that's happening in Poison Heart?
Yeah, definitely. So Poison Heart was definitely coming from the concept of someone who's gotten to the point where they're so jaded or so done with feeling emotions that they just want to just cut it off completely and not feel anything anymore.
Which is relatable.
And I think I've been at that point where it's like, I wish this just wasn't a thing I had to deal with anymore.
It's tricky being a human.
Yes, definitely.
As
but
the
then,
mermaid discovers.
Yes, definitely. And I think that, with writing that song, I wanted to think of, okay, well, what would actually happen if I did actually not feel, if I didn't have to be afraid of anything anymore? What would that do to my brain? And I think it would get to that point where you just can't feel anything else either, because
that would be the fate.
Yeah.
If you could switch off the emotions.
Yeah.
And retreat to the fantasy world.
Yes.
Then that would be the unhappy fate.
Yeah.
And I feel like the other songs, like Castle on the Moon, is dealing with a similar fact of life.
Yeah.
It looks so pretty, this castle on the moon, and then there's paradox here. Later on, it looks so ugly.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Gilbert relates the trickster to paradox and the ability to think two contradictory things at once, and the big magic that happens
definitely.
when one does that. Is there anything else going on along those lines in Castle on the Moon? What does Castle on the Moon have to express about fantasy and any of the other themes that we've been reflecting?
Yeah. I mean, I think it definitely pulls from that same concept of the castle on the moon is kind of this beautiful thing that you want to achieve, and then your natural, or society, I guess, is natural need to kind of take it and destroy it and make it something make it something that it wasn't before, and kind of pull those things away, and maybe, putting the boundaries, or the kind of stifling the castle into something that it can't be anymore.
Yeah. And a big idea in this main Trickster book is that if there is going to be a radical change, it needs to come from a character who is not considered to be central to the dominant narrative. Yes. The Trickster stories bring up questions of how change might come to an orderly, self-regulating, and self-protecting world. The self-containment of this self-protecting world means it knows nothing beyond its own givens. And so we need the accident that's related to the Trickster to happen to kind of mess up the patterning.
Yeah.
What thoughts do you have about that, of the impossibility? It makes the way in which the Into the Dark song ends with the falling into fiction and there being no escape. I feel like paradoxically, plot twists like the Trickster can show up to use fiction to escape.
Definitely.
From that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you would like this book.
Yeah, I think I would too.
Everything that the author says about the Trickster character seems applicable to the music of Loki's Folly.
Yeah, I might have to go purchase that book.
Yeah, I really recommend it.
Yeah.
Let's turn to Hiding in Plain Sight. He got no emotion is the first lyric that jumps out to me. So we've got this stifled bore, and it makes me think of the authority characters in Lilo and Stitch.
Yeah, definitely.
And the animation even kind of helps.
Yeah.
To how stuck
makes them very
character. He's like teasing Stitch.
Yeah.
Like, you are going to be destroyed. Ha 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 ha.
Yeah. Definitely.
No emotion.
Yeah.
He lives his life like he's in the movies. So here there's, as much as fictions can, if we tap into the archetypes and the theme of Sisu and the possibility of undergoing radical transformation through the rite of passage that story kind of pushes us into, we can also, if we don't approach narratives in that way, live our life like we're in the movies and just kind of play out stereotypical roles.
Go through the motions. Yeah, and that one I wrote after watching the Ted Bundy documentary on Netflix. And I think just him as a person really freaked me out and felt very antithetical to anything I support, which I believe most people would probably agree with, but hopefully.
Like the prince again.
Yeah.
Unable to discern and seize opportunities.
Yeah.
Being so caught up in dysfunctional patterning.
Yes, the things that he thought were right.
So let's, as we wrap up, turn back to the story of the band. And you were saying at the beginning of the interview that part of the reason for Sisu as the title is because the band itself underwent this kind of rite of passage and radical transformation, coming into being in the challenging context and of Act 1, ordinary world shifting in a very extreme way of the pandemic. Amidst other things as well. And whereas the Little Mermaids, or mermaids, I have it on good authority, when they are 15, can come up, see the humans. When you're 16 is when you had your first show. Could we wrap up by kind of going through the story of the coming of age, finding the way to kind of marry the silliness and the seriousness.
Yeah.
Maybe the role that Ryan plays as well, from being the music teacher of all three of the siblings.
Yeah.
To like I witnessed Brian jumping up on stage, playing different instruments, kind of helping make sure that everything was in order at 7th Street Entry. So how would you tell the story of Loki's Folly?
Yeah. Well, yeah, we started when I was 14, so Nissa would have been 9.
Mm-hmm.
9, which is fairly young. Started out playing her drums and me playing guitar. And we both really desperately wanted to be in a band and make music. And so then it just kind of naturally was the path to be like, let's start a band, the two of us. And
Oscar.
And then Oscar would have been 4 or 5 at that point. Mm-hmm. So wanted to, but he wasn't quite at the skill level yet.
Not when 4 or 5, not on the cusp of performing at the 7th Street Entry.
Yeah, not
which
quite.
Of course has just occurred.
Yes, had to wait till he was 12 to do the entry.
Everyone does that at 12.
Yes. So we started like that. Both really connecting over shared interests in music. And we started writing pretty quickly. I think Castle on the Moon was our first song. Mm-hmm. It was really...
Can you remember anything about kind of the session jamming or how it came to be?
Yeah, so that one we wrote over a sleepover in my bedroom. We had a laptop out. We were playing each other music that we were like, we should write like this, and we should write like
Can you remember what some of the music was?
Yeah, I can remember exactly. We had been obsessing over David Bowie's Black Star since it had just come out at the time.
David Bowie is my favorite, and Black Star is perhaps my favorite David Bowie record.
It's amazing. Yeah, and it was during that week or so period after it was released, but before he had died. So
comes out on his birthday.
Yeah.
Just before he dies.
Just before.
And it's all about death.
Yeah. And we were just awestruck by that entire record, so we had been playing that for each other, kind of pulling from that sort of inspiration. And then I think the idea for the castle came from my room has castles painted on the walls that my mom did when we were young.
By the way, I'm looking at your mouth.
Yes.
Off camera.
And I think we were just kind of doing that, like, what do we see? How do we put it into a song?
Yeah.
So,
in the way that Bowie's artfully integrating his life right at the end of it into his art. Yeah. In a very Bowie-esque way.
Definitely. Yeah.
So, I had the pleasure of just witnessing you live at the record release show.
Yeah.
What is on the horizon for Loki's Folly? Are there other opportunities, doors that tricksters can do things with to see you live anytime soon? Are you working on new music presently?
We are working on new music. Hopefully getting the next record all written out and ready to go. Mm-hmm. We have some shows coming up, and some secret opportunities that are very exciting coming up soon.
Tricksters have to just look out for those portals.
Yes, definitely.
Tricksters can have faith that the portals will appear.
Yes.
Just
hop in when they're ready.
And of course, you can be followed on or social media.
Yep.
Loki's Folly
Band at Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, all of them.
Excellent. Well, we will keep on watching those spaces and waiting for the portals to appear. In the promised portal.
Yes.
And in the meantime, thank you very much for coming in and having a chat about all things Trickster.
Yeah, thank you. This was so much fun.
You're very welcome. This has been really fun. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you.
I'm Simon Calder. This is the new spring season of Back to the City. We'll be back with another episode next Thursday. So keep watching the portal to discover who the guest will be.